All right, namaste. Today is July 16, and we are still on page 2 of Jack Colley's Black Book. So I've got maybe a couple more, it looks like 2 or 3 more topics to cover. And part of page 2 in dealing with kind of how do we process good and evil was the idea of original sin. And in my Black Book, I had kind of inferred this question of to what extent do we have to sin? And certainly not saying that we should go out and sin, certainly not saying that we should go out and behave in certain ways simply so that we can learn from our mistakes. So I'm not suggesting that. And yet there is something to be said about when do we grow as human beings? So where does our growth take place? What do we need in order to develop? What do we need in order to grow? So the idea here is, to what extent do we need to have sin? To what extent do we have to be imperfect to realize that we need to work toward something, toward an archetype of perfection, if you will? And I want to make just a couple of observations. I don't know if I have many statements to make other than these are observations. And maybe somebody can send me an email or give me some ideas about what they think about this. But clearly on page 2, as I was kind of grappling with good versus evil, the idea of maybe we have to have these dark areas of our life. Maybe we even have to have evil in our lives, if for no other reason than to drive us toward good, or to even perhaps make us understand maybe we have shortcomings in obtaining the good, that we need to have some grace. We need to have something, grace or mercy. So what I was thinking of is this. Heaven is this idea, at least this is the way that heaven was presented to me. And heaven was presented to me, and I remember there's a little church in the town where I live right now. There's a little church that I attended as a kid, and this particular church, I remember the pastor getting up in front, and he would kind of go off on this rant. Rant is probably not the right word, because I think he was truly excited about what he was saying, but he would just get into this, won't it be great the day that we are all in heaven and it's perfect, there's no sickness, there's no illness. And the thing that caught my attention was, he would always say this after a hymn was sang. And he would get legitimately excited about going to a place where there was no illness, there was perfection. And his idea, and I'm not sure where he got this from, I'm assuming it was probably based in the Bible somewhere. This was a Bible church. And his idea was, won't it be great when we can sing hymns like this for all of eternity? And I just remember sitting there as I was probably a kid, maybe a teenager, and I could distinctly remember just sitting there thinking, hell no. No, thank you. I do not want to do this for eternity. It's just not for me. I have a deep appreciation of some of the hymns. I've been reflecting a lot on the hymn Amazing Grace. There's a lot of interesting truths in that are just kind of speaking to me right now. So it's not that I don't have an appreciation of hymns. It's the idea that people consider heaven this place where we're going to sing for eternity. And I just remember thinking, well, I know what this particular church teaches about hell, being alone, this eternal damnation, the lake of fire, pain, suffering, all this stuff that sometimes hell is painted as. And I just found myself sitting there thinking, I do not want to go to heaven. That's going to be hell if I have to spend eternity singing hymns. So that's kind of, I think, what kind of inspired some of the thoughts on page 2, this dynamic of good versus evil. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, looks like I've got 5 examples I want to buzz through, just to give you an idea where I'm coming from. Crab legs and prime rib, probably one of my favorite meals. There is something about spending some extra money on these huge king crab legs, dunking them in butter, which is basically a 100% cholesterol snack. I love the taste. I mean, I really enjoy that. Now, I'm not much of a meat eater anymore, but at the same time, like that is what I would describe as perhaps like a heavenly meal, just crab legs with drawn butter. I'm going to pay for it after I eat them, but I really enjoy that. But if I get myself into a routine where I am somehow able to afford crab legs and prime rib every single day, well, one can only imagine that after 3 or 4 days, I'm going to be just freaking sick of crab legs and prime rib. I'm just going to have no interest in crab legs and prime rib, and I'm going to have to take a break. Groundhog Day, the great movie with Bill Murray, where every day is the same, and he begins to realize that he can make some changes, he can take some risk each day to kind of change the narrative, but he keeps waking up on the same day, and it becomes kind of a veritable hell. Another thing that I came up with in, I want to say like the 1970s, Dunkin' Donuts had a commercial with this, the donut maker. He was like a short guy with curly hair. You could Google him, I'm sure, and find some images. But the whole advertising campaign was like it was 4 a.m. or whatever, and the alarm would go off, and he'd get out of bed, and he would say, "Time to make the donuts." And that was his reality, day in and day out, was providing fresh donuts. Well, again, one can imagine that would eventually be hell to have to do that each day. Disney World. As much as I love going to Animal Kingdom and waking up at the Jumbo House and having giraffes and these animals while I drink my coffee on the porch, once a year I kind of go all out and get a nice room that I can just kind of relax and be with the animals. But if I were to do that more than 7 or 8 days, well, you might be able to talk me into 2 or 3 weeks. You never know with Disney World, but at some point, it's just going to become hell. At some point, you want to come back and be in reality. The Talking Heads I'm discovering that the Talking Heads is an excellent place to get your theology, or to at least have questions raised. I think that's part of why I like writing music, is I can take some of these ideas that are at tension in my life, and I can write a song, and once the song is released, it's almost like, okay, I dealt with that topic, or I dealt with that tension. Heaven is a place, I think I have the lyrics pulled up here. I'm going to just pull these up. Just to kind of summarize. So it's a story about, everyone's trying to get to a place, a bar, and the bar is called Heaven, and they are playing the protagonist's favorite song, and then the chorus goes, heaven is a place where nothing ever really happens. And then there's a party, everyone is there, everyone leaves at exactly the same time. The party ends, but the next day the party starts over. And then there's a kiss, and once the kiss occurs, it's over, but then it starts the next day. I think the idea being is, that sounds like hell to me, to exist in a place where in the end, nothing is really happening. Everything is just the same. It's repeated. It's just the same. It helps me to understand and appreciate, again, using the model of, wrong hand there. There we go. Using yin yang. If heaven is order, like it is here, and if it's the Garden of Eden, which is perfection, if we take the serpent out of the story, if we exist in heaven and there is no concept of hell, there is not even the most infinitesimal threat of not heaven, then what does that do to our existence? It seems to me that if you are in eternal chaos, which is the dark here, sorry, I can't get used to doing things opposite, but it seems to me that if you are in eternal chaos, that's hell, because nothing's going to change. And yet at the same time, if we are in eternal order, that can also be hell if it's day in and day out. So somehow it must be necessary for us to experience some sort of tension for us to grow. And perhaps we need to embrace that tension as, in order for us to grow and for us to develop. So the idea of even heaven and hell as eternal places where we exist, where the rules are very delineated. Heaven is perfection. Heaven is you get up and you do the same thing each day, and hell is this, it's torment, but it's the same thing each day. Eventually, it seems to me that we're just going to almost feel trapped in either of those places. And so to what extent do we have to have kind of the bad guy in the narrative? To what extent do we have to have Satan as the archetype of evil in order to keep us growing and developing? I know part of the answer is this. Populations and organisms, so now we're kind of going into science, population and organisms will not evolve, they will not go to the next step in evolution unless they are under some sort of stress. I tell my college students this as well. I say to them, on day one of class, I want to stress you out a little bit, because if you're not under stress in my class, then you're not going to learn. If it comes too easy, then you're not going to be developed as a human being. I also, though, at the same time, I say I don't want you to be so stressed, that you're unable to manage life, because, that's going to the other extreme. But it's really important, it seems, to have this area of tension where we have to exist in order to develop. And I would probably argue that exists right along this continuum. Again, I'm going to try to do this while doing everything opposite, but the border between this side of yin yang and this side of yin yang, it seems like if we exist there in that tension between the two, it seems like that is the space that is going to develop us and hopefully push us toward becoming most human. So let's stop there, and we'll pick up here next time. So namaste, my friends.